Well, hello there. Welcome to the podcast. Today, we have a special guest co hosting, Sean from OP. And we have our really super duper special guest, a pediatrician from Rhode Island, Dr. Peter Pogastar. Did I say it right?
Very close. Pogacar.
Almost. Pogacar.
Got it.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And we were going to go through a few things in your life. And we always ask, why did you become a pediatrician?
Yeah. So in my journey, I started off in high school being attracted to emergency medicine. It was the time of like when ER was on the TV, and it was just interesting. I thought that was very high paced, and I thought this was going to be my life. And I went to college and was pre-med, but also became an EMT and worked on the school's voluntary EMS service, and really got a lot of hands-on experience, and I enjoyed it. I got a job EMS in Boston as well in school, and just was really having tremendous amount of fun, and ended up getting into medical school. The whole idea is emergency medicine all the way. Then it came time for my clinicals, and I don't know. I kind of lost the spirit with emergency medicine. It really felt like we were triaging everything. When anything was really needed, we would call in the specialist to come in and do the heavy lifting. I didn't feel like I was fixing enough problems. I did a peds rotation, and it was the match. You know, the very incredible population to work with, and dynamic families. And the number one thing you hear from most pediatricians, I imagine, is that the kids get better. And even the kids in the cancer wards, were getting better. It was more about health than about disease. I always enjoyed children. I also worked as a camp counselor. I decided to do a pediatric residency, and I was still even thinking peds emergency room, but I really fell in love with having the continuity of care with patients and their families, and doing outpatient in Connecticut with Hamden Pediatrics, and the pediatrician became my mentor. It was just an amazing experience, and even in the short time as a resident, I got to know families and see them over time develop, deal with problems. It was really fascinating and powerful. So,
Oh, wow. And your journey through medicine is you went to Tufts University undergrad.
mm-hmm.
And then you went to Boston College of Medicine.
Yep. So Boston University.
Boston University. And then you went to the Yale New Haven Children's Hospital.
That's correct. Yep. That was the educational movement I did. Yep.
Now, there was an interesting thing here. You went on to the Navy after that.
Right. So it wasn't even after that. The interesting thing of how the Navy Health Professional Scholarship Program works is that you sign on even before getting into medical school. So I signed my commission into the Navy in my senior year of undergrad at Tufts, and was commissioned an officer, and went and did my officer training school, and was in the reserves starting my first year of medical school, and that summer in between. And again, fit my life's direction because I was going to be an emergency room doctor. Which I didn't realize I was going to change before I signed and before I even went to medical school. So the Navy's an interesting place. I continued to do on the summers, you would do your reserve duty. So I was able to do my service during the summer. It was always medical related. They let you stay within your job description. And then in medical school, I realized that I even had more options than emergency medicine, even within the Navy. The Navy has their own pediatric hospital, not standalone hospitals, but their own pediatric residency programs within hospitals, and is unbelievable. They have subspecialties, and just like you would think of in any other major medical hospital system. So I was interested in that, but of course, the Navy also doesn't just limit themselves to their residency programs that they have. You can apply for deferment. It depends on what they always describe as the needs of the Navy. And that's something that everyone who's involved in the Navy understands clearly. It's basically the needs of the Navy comes first, and it's sort of their carte blanche to do what they want when they want.
That's incredible. I'm the son of a Navy man. My father recently passed, and I've been hearing stories about the Navy And I knew it growing up because I'd see him go off to reserves. And I always thought, well, he's just going in the submarine, which, by the way, he wasn't. Spoiler alert for everybody. He wasn't doing that. He had done his time on nuke boats. He had a nice line of scar tissue here from going under and whacking his head every time he went. But it's intriguing to me, and kind of as my life's gone on and I've befriended more people of a military swath, if you will, there's way more to it than I think society is aware of. And so to marry up, sure, you can go back and you can watch MASH. It doesn't really do it. So I think that's so interesting that you were able to experience all of that through the Navy.
So I want to ask you to walk us a little bit through your office. I think you have 5 or 6 pediatricians and 1 physician extender.
So we have 5 pediatricians and 2 nurse practitioners. That's right.
Okay. And is it all in one physical location, or do you have
one physical location? Yeah.
And how many exam rooms do you have?
12.
12. What EMR/CRM are you using at this point?
Athena.
Mm-hmm. Do you like it?
I do like it. I find it very user-friendly, and you get used to one thing, I imagine, but it really does seem intuitive, especially with some of the other systems I've used. That being said, probably the biggest knock against it is that it's not pediatric specific. It certainly has some clunk to it because it's trying to serve so many masters at once.
Okay. They're very controlling, right? Like your money goes into a bank account from them, and they audit it, and then they tell you what you were supposed to get, and then they send it to you. They have a super control center in Boston, where they see all the claims going by.
That's right. That is their sort of business structure. The good news is that we sort of signed on early, so we're allowed to keep our billing separate, and we have our own in-house biller, and we really enjoy the control that we can continue to keep.
Okay, and now going back to the Navy, because one thing that always interested me about the Navy is how they train their leadership. And 2 things that they do, which I think is fascinating. One is their command is based on 2 things: 1, rank, or the placement of where you're at. Mm-hmm. So as I understand it, you can correct me and chime in, but if I was a general and you were a captain, you bring your daughter to the clinic, I have command over you. But if you're the general and I'm the captain, you bring your daughter to the clinic, I have command over you because I have operational command of that clinic.
Yeah, so right, that is correct in the letter of understanding how the command would go, but the respect, of course, it is lots of deference given to rank. If a general or a senior officer or like the captain in the Navy is around, there's definitely going to be a lot more consideration and thought, and people asking what their opinion is, more than if you were a lower ranking. So ranking does mean a lot. It isn't always very clear, exactly who's going to be the person who's going to trump the other person, but it's usually understood very easily and much more clear than in civilian world. And like anywhere else, though, it's also the personality of the actual people involved. It's not always just about rank. It's just like anything else. It's human relationships.
I think if emergency rooms in America were run like in the armed forces, where there's an operational commander that controls the physicians, the physician extenders, the clerical staff, the nursing staff, and he or she has command over them, we would have much more efficient ERs and they would function much better. Because in the hospital system, the nursing reports to one branch and the clerical to another, and the doctors are contracted, and the cleaning staff is another contractor. You tell the cleaning staff, I need this room clean, and they're like, you're not my boss. You need to call this number.
You're going to need to take that up with whoever. Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, I'm only asking for the room to be clean so I can see the next patient. Well, that's not my job. You got to call this number so they'll dispatch somebody.
No, there's less of that, but there is some division there. You do have like the nurses having their own sort of line of command and deal with their own issues. And there's still some of that, there's lots of room for sort of yes, sirring you to your face, but at the same time, not exactly doing what you want done or what you explain to be done. But it's, again, much more clear than the civilian world. That's true.
Yeah.
And then the other two things that I think they do great, and those are lessons I think can be learned by anybody leading an organization, is they're in constant state of renewal, at least for the office. They're always trying to educate them more, give them new experiences, partner them with mentors. The second thing they do, which I think is also fascinating, is the armed forces has this philosophy: everybody should be able to be killed quickly and replaced. And so they moved you around every 2 years.
That's right.
You can't stay in a place for more than 2 years. You'll become corrupt, or if you die, nobody else knows how to do your job, and people die in wars.
There's a sort of brutal efficiency to that. And I have to say, I kind of like that. To your other point, Herb, my dad and actually my neighbor across the street, same role, and I didn't know, they were both career counselors in the reserves. They had, Pete, you'll probably recognize, I'll call it wrong probably, they had a cookie on their shirt, and they were counselors. That's what they did. They helped not only prepare them for what's inside the Navy, but what's outside the Navy. There was always this mindfulness. If you hear career pathways in just the, standard employment world, people kind of go, "Whoa, really? Wow, they're looking to advance you." And yet in the armed forces, and I'll just speak specifically to the Navy, it's expected. Like it's evolve or die. So
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the other very interesting thing is that it's a very young place. You don't see too many older people. There's basically, most people are, even the officers are, 50s and less, and even 50s is unusual to see around. It's really unbelievable how young everyone was. I was one of the places, the place I spent the most time in my time in the military was at the Quantico Marine Corps base in Northern Virginia. It was like a small city, but there's no old people. It's just all young, fit people with their young families, and the officers are young. Everybody's young, yet they're in charge of extremely important, very high, important issues. That's where the president's helicopter crew runs out of, and Marine One. It's amazing how responsible and qualified all these really young people are, and the job that they do.
So when you in the governance of your group, do you follow that? Do you guys rotate responsibilities for different areas of the practice, like in the military?
We actually do rotate those responsibilities, but more on paper. I think we do tend to gravitate towards the skill sets that we're good at. Probably would benefit more if we rotated them in a more strict fashion. I do think we tend to stick to what we're good at and really have refined them over the years, as opposed to try to switch who's in charge of dealing with the staff issues versus who's in charge of dealing with billing and contracting and so on.
You do have parceled it out to different partners, which is great.
Yeah, I'm super lucky. I really, when I look or talk to other practices, I feel like we're equal partners with the 3 other equal partners in the practice and 1 employed physician. And my 3 other partners, I feel like we all pitch in different ways, but quite equally. It really is a good feeling to fall back on, especially in hard times like what we saw around COVID. It was easy to really pessimistic, and then that can breed contempt. I saw it as the opposite in my practice, just because we relied on each other.
Oh, wow, that's very interesting. What are you responsible for right now in the practice on paper?
I mainly deal with is the contracting and the ACO that we work with, dealing with, and the billing and the coding of the practice, and where we are with our various contracts, if it's NCQA related to all the way to just, how are we contracting with our construction guy to come give us a new generator, all those contracts.
I don't know Rhode Island at all, but is it a concentrated market? Like in Virginia, 40% of people in the state are insured by Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you're not going to negotiate with them.
I think that's the whole country. Most states now have 1 or 2 major insurers. And yes, it's extremely hard to negotiate with the insurers directly. So a lot of it is around the edges. negotiating around programs that these insurers are offering. Within those programs, there's room for negotiation for most of it is metric based. So how much are they going to give you for your metric? So you try to set the whatever bar is achievable for your practice to get the biggest reward.
Okay. And how are you measuring those metrics? Is Athena helping you with the dashboard?
Absolutely. Yeah. Athena does a really good job with that. They definitely are make it easy. It's so much so that our ACO folks are able to just go into the system and run the reports without direct practice involvement. So they can give us these reports, and the insurers say what they want. The metric people, the IT people generate the reports, and then we get the presentation with minimal MD work involved.
Okay,
that's incredible. I mean, from a technological perspective, this is where I have two doctors, and here's tech guy. So I might chime in, but for a second. Yeah. That's where technology. That's how technology should work. It should be seamless. It should feel like it's not even a lift. It should feel almost like it's just in lockstep with what you're doing anyway. So that's great to hear.
Absolutely. But you don't have a dashboard with your clinical goals and your KPIs that you can see every day when you turn your computer on and see where you're at?
So there is a dashboard that's generic like that. And then the IT people have built out program specific metrics and dashboards. And that I don't even have access to. They just give us these, they'll give us the reports. I bet I could get access to it, but I don't think I would ever look at it. I look at it when they tell me it's important to look at it.
Okay. In the journey of the evolution of your practice, and I apologize. I've never been up to Rhode Island. You're moving from what would be a solo, and the 5 of you, 1 office, 2 physician extenders, into a clinically integrated network. That's the path you're charted.
That's the goal. So right now we're in basically an IPA that is been very beneficial for the program, for the practice, based on value-based contracting and on some economy of scale issues, which has been great and helpful. But to really maximize our abilities to negotiate contracts, I do think we need to get bigger. And it's really hard to stay just your little, 1 office, 5 doctor place. So we're trying to figure that out. So we're in the middle of discussing with Rhode Island is full of these, like pediatrics in Rhode Island is basically you have your community health centers, and then you have your private practice docs that are all independent docs, a lot of solo docs, a lot of 2 or 3 practice docs.
Okay.
Yeah, and being someone who is completely new to the concept of the CIN, when Herb first introduced this to me, I mean, I was blown away, and it speaks to when we think about adult learning, because a lot of what I do centers around e-learning, there's this field of social learning, and it basically gets people together in the ether, if you will, and allows them that kind of group thought that wasn't possible before. And for me, this parallel, this aha moment to me understanding it was taking that CIN and going, oh, so these, 1 and 2 physician, maybe 5 come together. Now they're this collective. It's this we are greater than me moment.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's good for contracting, but it's good for medicine too. But we are fairly close. Regardless, the pediatric community is a fairly close community, and the practices in my IPA are like, especially around COVID. I mean, this is where a lot of the strengths really came out, because you had to rely on these relationships and backbone to be able to stand up against the pandemic. And I really was encouraged by how the other practices responded and how we worked together and shared resources and came up with ideas with the Department of Health, how we're going to have sick patients, where we're going to see our sick patients. And it was very much a groupthink approach and problem solving. And it worked. Yeah.
Nice. I think the further you go up the Northeast, the more socially minded you become. Virginia is still pretty much, the Wild West. You ride your horse and you're on your own. So it's very interesting. You guys seem like you're more cohesive. And in this journey for the CIN, are you looking to become one big group, or are you looking to just have an entity that negotiates value-based with good, robust data and quality?
Well, so we're exploring is really the idea, because, what are the what are the details of these relationships and these constructs? Where does that put us? Where does that leave us? And so we're having these talks and we had the preliminary talk. We're trying to bring lots and lots of practices, adult practices and pediatric practices, into one tax ID. That sort of fell apart. A lot of the adult practices were just not interested in doing this. But at the same time, we got to learn, because we got to speak to the lawyers who were actually trying to pitch the idea. And I still think that's an idea that could work for pediatrics. So I like to explore that with some of our partners here in Rhode Island, other pediatric practices, and see what their ideas are and see what we can do together.
Now, have you hired a coach?
We've talked to Allied, Gary and Carrie. I had the board of my IPA for pediatrics speak with Gary and Carrie about their experiences. And they actually have a whole arm that's been built out to help other pediatric practices create an infrastructure similar to Allied. That may be something that we turn back to for assistance as well. I think that's an unbelievable resource.
And have you thought about doing some mastermind group?
Explain what that would be. I'm not sure.
Okay. So a mastermind group is a concept totally out of the industry of healthcare, but it's where people with a common goal. So let's say realtors need to find in this market right now, they need to find listings. Because if you're bringing a client to buy a house, you're toast. There's 10 offers, you're not going to get any money out of it. So they meet once or twice a year, usually put together by a technology company, say like OP, but for realtors. And they sit around a room, usually 20 to 40 persons, and they each bring a problem. They're all from different parts of the country to the table. And there's some people there that have already mastered this and some people that are learning. So for example, you might have a Gary Merkin on the table who's already done a group without walls. And you might have you from your group who's looking at what option's best for your group. And you would bring your problem, and the other 30 people in the room would say, this is the journey we went through. This worked, this didn't work. For example, don't waste a lot of money in attorney fees. That, they'll chew up $25,000, $30,000 looking at the problem, give you a standard document. And at the end of the day, if you can't convince the other pediatricians in town to join in one structure that they're comfortable with, nothing's going to happen. You're just going to waste your $30,000. And I find that a fascinating way of learning, an adult model of learning, not where you sit in a room and a consultant that's, advocating for their product, which is nothing wrong with it. Mm-hmm. Gives you a canned speech that they give every week at a different pediatric meeting. That's the concept of the mastermind.
No, I mean, that speaks to knowledge retention in general. They say statistics, something like 10% heard, 20% seen, 90% peer-to-peer. So it's not teacher to peer, it's peer-to-peer. And when we engage on that peer level, there's an instant uptake because ego kind of goes out the window. Oh, you're in the same boat as I am, or you were. What can I learn from what you went through? I don't know how many times I've shared a model for rapid development of e-learning that people look at me like it's the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, wow, I didn't really think of it. I just lived it. But if you're on that other side and you can hear that, instead of it being from someone like you said, Herb, trying to, hawk their wares, nothing wrong with that, you're going to immediately absorb that so much more deeply and meaningfully.
As you mentioned before, the human touch, the human connection, because you're with these people for 2 days in a location, you eat dinner with them. So while you're having dinner with them, you're talking about, oh my goodness, I can't hire the right person. And, then there's Herb who says, go read this book. It's in the book. There's a process.
Or I know somebody, or I know another somebody. Yes. And there's that immediate connection for sure.
It's a very cool learning experience. The coaching is also phenomenal. And Tony Roberts, who is famous psychologist and, entrepreneur, does a lot of it. But I have seen it work, and it's basically like a personal trainer. They keep you accountable. They say, You want to lose 10 pounds and be at this body mass, by 6 months from now. Here's our plan. Here are our goals. You got to do this many miles a week. You got to do this. You got to do that. And then they check on you every week and go, where are we? Did you run your 10 miles this week or not? Why didn't you? What are you going to do next week to change? So that level of accountability is really, really good. And in OP, Bethany does that really well. Before she closes out the meeting, she goes, what are our actionable steps and where are we meeting next? Right? That's her coaching. I want to hear from each one on the table what you're going to do. And then we're going to ask you if you did it when we come back. That's a great way of motivating people to do what's right. If they're professionals and they want to advance, a personal trainer can't make you lose weight if you don't want to get off the couch. But those are two very interesting concepts. I was going to ask you, what book are you reading?
Me, myself?
Yes, of course. You.
Okay, sorry. I thought we were talking. So I will, I like Malcolm Gladwell, so some of his books I will read, but the one I kind of go back to sometimes is Talking to Strangers, is a book, and it's interesting. It's about, how, you can make connections with people and really get to hear what they have to say. I like those kind of books that help me understand what other tools people are using to get to answers that I think that sometimes I need to try better at, to find these answers and to ask the right questions. Because I think that's a challenge,
Oh. And who would you like to have us host on the podcast next?
Well, if the person I want to speak to the most, if my friends will tell you, is Paul Offit. I haven't had a chance to speak to Paul Offit for the whole pandemic, and I'm just very, very curious about some of these ideas that as I work with the pediatric groups and locally with our local Department of Health, and then we have the CDC, and there seems to be things that are just lost in translation. And I just would like to hear Dr. Offit's take on a lot of these issues.
That would be a very interesting interview, wouldn't it?
Oh my God, yeah.
Extremely difficult to book, I'm sure.
I imagine. I don't know. I'm attempting to get in touch with him. I haven't been successful yet, but it only recently started, to be honest. So we'll see.
I think Seth Toback knows him. He was on the podcast, and Dr. Toback's a dermatologist out there in Rhode Island. So I don't know if you know him. He's got to be in his 70s because Seth is a little younger than me, but not by much. And Dr. Toback Sr. still shows up to see patients and give advice, and gives advice to kids and gives advice to adults and internal medicine. He's like like a good old country doc. But a dermatologist, really nice family. Well, this has been fun. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here tonight, taking time from your families and your jobs to be on the podcast. Really do enjoy these conversations. And, hopefully we'll get to see each other in the same room and not that too distant future.
Yeah, I really appreciate having these conversations and watching your podcast. So I'm hopeful to see it continue to grow.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Herb, for having me on. Look forward to doing it again.
Sean. All right. You guys have a good night.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye, Sean.